let's start things off. I was incorrect about the unemployed Capitanos. Each time I move, I can move 2 of them, and there's no accounting for them. So they'll be able to run more quickly than I've been assuming. I don't think I had another command that he could have moved during, so I may be mistaken, though. He may be with De Leyva here. So be it. The fall of Milan. This was one of those weird kind of situations where it was sort of a high risk, well, it was an unlikely attack, a low odds attack, but also a low risk attack. The Swiss basically would be, well, there's a possibility they could fail their command check. There's no question of that. That would be the biggest risk. And then their force would have to find some place to withdraw to and recover. That's okay, though. It wasn't like I'm going to lose my whole army. Colonna's whole army was on the line because it's a siege. And that was the difference. So what ended up being... We were on the 0 table, I think, at -1. I needed a 5 or a 6 to have, well... Maybe I'm missing it wrong, or reading it wrong. Yeah, I needed a 6 to succeed. I had a 1 in 6 chance of any possibility of success. Wait, what about this table? See, I'm having trouble reading the table. But yeah, I needed the 6 that I got to have any chance of success at all. This is the only thing that forced a morale check. But if I lost, chances were I would only take a hit and a morale check. Well, maybe I get disordered, maybe I have to break the siege, but I have a 1 in 6 chance with the Swiss of just taking the city each time, and a fair chance of, it failing completely. So it wasn't a very high risk, but it was low odds. But Colonna's whole army was up at stake on that. Anyway, now that that's fallen, it's time to do some gamesmanship here. And that involves, we have rain, which is going to slow down movement across rivers. That involves some command changes. First, Trivulzio, switching to garrison so that he's no longer, he made it in. Switching to garrison so he's no longer in attack mode. He could stay in maneuver if he wanted, but, I don't see much reason not to. It cost me 0 to switch to maneuver. No, he's a minor force. Wait. Yeah, changing to maneuver costs him a point. So he doesn't want to do that. So he switches to a garrison. He ends up okay. Von Stein switches to maneuver, and I've got to pay for that. And I've been paying that out of the French, which is probably... I wish I could pay for it out of the Venetians. I don't know that I can't. But right now, I'm not sure I have... I don't really need a line of communication. Anyway, I'm close to the French. Let's not worry about it. Try to make it make sense. Okay. He wants a maneuver because he's worried about Trivulzio's position right now. And by switching from attack to maneuver, he's not going to go into the previously attacked status, or previously attacking status, which I think is total bullshit. But the only thing I can think of is that you'd put that down now. But even if you did, it still would go away at the beginning of next turn. So it's essentially the same effect to make this switch on the last turn of an AP cycle, essentially, right before a yellow turn. So I just don't see a way of fixing it that would make sense. I wish that instead of just this previous attack marker being a whole cycle, it was a previous attack with a number and it counted down, and it would be that many turns, because it's unreasonable that you can switch out of attack and then attack again the next turn, whereas if you allow yourself to be cleaned up in the yellow phase, what's so special about those turns? There's nothing special about them. But if you attack during those, if you're in attack orders during them, it means that you cannot attack for the entirety of that section. And that's just weird. And I think that's a piece of the game that needs to be reworked. Lautrec's still in maneuver, but he's breaking Leskunov. Now, it's free to take a retreat order, so that's what I'm going to do, so I can retreat to Milan, drop into garrison there or whatever, and start recovering from my demoralization, and put myself in a position where I've got Milan garrisoned as well. This is all I need in order to trace down to Genoa and get my special reinforcements. It's also all I need in order to trace back to my supply source, so I'm going to get, some admin points with the French at some point. The Venetians have tons of admin points, although they may get cut if they're under siege or whatever. And that's really what the Imperials are doing. They have a tough choice here. Game full of tough choices. Devasto and Sforza are both in range to lay siege. And that may be my only answer, because otherwise the Swiss might come up our ass. And you don't want that to happen. What that means is I kind of want to switch to attack orders right now, even though I don't have points. That would mean a force. These are normal units. Sforza has some sensitive and very sensitive units, which means maybe I want to hold off with him. I don't have any artillery or anything, but I really need to clear this shit out of the way before anything further happens. How much does Trivulzio have? I don't know this, I can't look, but I can look at the scenario instructions and see what kind of force he has, more or less, to begin with. He hasn't been able to change that. He's bigger than either of my forces. That's the problem. I might be able to attrition him, though, if I cut his supply line. Unfortunately, the hexes needed are kind of the wrong hexes. I can't really get in there. So I'm going to have Del Vasto try to force into... But if I go into attack order, I'm not in attack order next turn. Screw that. I stay in maneuver. I probably can't make it anyway once I drop that admin march, just because chances are I'm not going to get the initiative rolls I need. So we're done with the Imperials. But you can see there's something sort of gamey and weird about the command system that really needs some tinkering. In terms of that, the choice to be in attack. Hey, if I'm in attack now, I only get to be in attack for this one turn. That's it. It's screwy. It's the same kind of thing. Anytime you impose a turn order with certain turns being specialized, you get a problem like that. The thing is, here it's a little worse than in most games. All right. Here's actually our position. In place to get our first move, the first turn's bonus. There's only one turn. It's just whether we get it on the first turn or the second turn, or not at all. Milan's garrisoned here. The Swiss pushing behind Del Vasto, and Sforza only got to move one hex. During that hex, though, we get to throw him into Del Leva, which frees up a force, but it's a little late. That force can't cut all the different paths. There's too many crossroads here to knock things out. The only thing we could do is if we actually put this under siege, maybe from this swamp, we'd be cutting these two roads, and that would do it. But that's it, and that's obviously not going to work. All right, well, see how things go in this next turn. So the current turn shut up and we got a mud event. This is actually the same situation as the last turn. I thought I was running into the yellow turn, and I'm actually was one turn off. So I'm in the same position where, hey, do you want to launch your attack on Trivulzio or not? Do you want to spend that effort now, or do you want to wait? Do you want to try to gather Sforza and get him up with Del Vasto and have a combined force that maybe can face the Swiss, because Del Vasto on his own is too weak, I think. The Swiss look a lot bigger. Likewise, for the French, I could dispatch a force to sit here, or I could dispatch one to move. Giovanni has a faster force, and he actually has some special rules with that I'm not familiar with, that I ought to look up, where I could send a force out to go try to reach these. The problem is I don't have any APs left. Now, yes, I'm getting some as reinforcements this turn, but I don't have them at this point, so I would have to roll to have any orders in place. And these guys are S, which I think, I don't know if that's standard or sensitive. I think that's sensitive, which means he's not particularly a good choice to roll for. So I will probably keep that force together and keep moving and try to do what? You know, do I have enough to face Torniello here with a siege? Well, I can't launch the siege right now, but I could start my movement through the swamp, perhaps taking attrition, to position myself. Of course, that opens up my supply path if I do that. Alternatively, I could go after Deleva, who's a little stronger. But again, then that opens up the threat to the supply path. So there's all these, I don't know what to do. I need to grab more territory with the French. Right now it feels like the balance is going to come down to the fight over here, but nobody can really commit the points to generating that fight either. And it's a shame. I should not have put the Swiss under a maneuver order, although they wouldn't have been able to get this far without taking administrative march, which they wouldn't have been able to do if they were in attack order. So, you know, however you want to look at it, I think we've kind of got another blank turn coming up. I will be getting some points, though. Let me just make sure there isn't anything I want to do. Do I want to roll for these? No, I think I'll keep them in maneuver and try to gather Sforza's forces to maybe face the Swiss. It won't get a major battle. It's the only Capitano General there is Lautrec. And what beyond that? I mean, I don't know. I could certainly drop Giovanni off. He's kind of cool to drop off. Or, yeah, I could drop him off and try to march down myself and take these southern areas and get score from them. That is something I can do without any real harm. Alternatively, I could drop somebody else off. Yeah, but then I've got these guns. This thing is faster. Yeah, so I think I'm going to drop Giovanni off, but I have trouble. I can't do that one-handed. And I think that's about it for that effect. 2 bonuses here in exchange for this. I get 3 APs, which I can't use yet, but they'll add up. Put this somewhere for now. I don't know, it should be in a bag or something, I guess, but... And I also get 4 strength points added to my force. And they have to be able to make that trace, which luckily goes all the way to Milan, so I can get them here. Because otherwise, I could only take 2 and then down here. Instead, I'm going to put all 4 into this unit, which is equally good. It's a French infantry. It has to be French. I hope it has to be French infantry. Yeah, 4 French infantry. So I couldn't, take my cav or something back. But those units have been destroyed. I can't take destroyed units back, I don't think, either. So we've got our forces, and now we start the regular activation phase with the effect of mud, which slows down movement. Our endpoint has Lautrec moving into the swamp. He ends up taking an attrition roll, but he's got a small enough force that's not too important. These are all just leaders that are with him. The maneuvering around here, you can see Del Vasto moved up, grabbed this fortress. That doesn't matter too much in terms of cutting the Venetians off. You have to cut Crema and the traversal from here. And I really couldn't hit both and needed to keep my own pathway open, because if I abandon this in either direction, this road here, I've got a problem, because if the Swiss had moved up to here, this is a fortress, they would have blocked any access to this, which may not be that important, because right now the line is passing down here, but eventually the loss of Brescia could happen, and that would cut off the Imperial supply line, and that would be very troublesome. Speaking of which, we're on a supply turn. Everybody's going to lose their orders. Hey, everybody got out of attack orders, a couple of turns ago, but in time that they're not affected by those previous attack rolls, which, again, that's a real sticking point for me. I think it can be fixed fairly easily. Just put a counter on those, and as soon as somebody gives up attack orders, they have, like, say, 3 or 4 turns, depending on how you want to actually handle it, that they have to go into forced attack in order to be in that position. It's just the game doesn't support that as written. Sforza barely made any ground, though. Trivulzio. A number of these leaders just being used as foils to kind of prevent actions from happening. Oh, I forgot to make my roll for him. Let's do that. When he did his activation, he should have made a roll, but I was busy dealing with my snot. Oh no, he failed. He failed, but no worse than that. Alright, let's get going. Enter this turn in which there's going to be administrative points granted to everyone. We're in an interesting position. The question of whether the Imperials want to offer an interface turn. Here's the thing. They have something like 13 victory point lead, I think. I'm not sure. 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, no, not quite. 12 to 2. A 10 victory point lead, I think. Huge advantage. Maybe I missed one. Maybe it can't be 13. I'd have to miss a couple. I missed this one. So 11 point lead. But if I offer an interphase, the French aren't going to accept it. Now that means the French are going to get less administrative points, but they have plenty built up, especially with the Venetians. They can't really use the Venetians. Okay, that's fair. But they probably have enough built up to go capture a couple of towns. Maybe even to launch an attack somewhere. But certainly to clean up some of the points that are available. And it would force my Imperial forces to go into, not quarters, but let's see. If the opposing player refuses, the offering player must always select standard garrison orders for the current turn. Which, I can trump away from them in the next move, if that's the case. But how important is it? So if it's only for the next turn, there's an interesting question there, because I could upgrade my orders. Sforza could go from stand to regular orders, and it doesn't really cost him. Well, actually it does cost him, because I'll have 2 guys in stand orders, which cost 1 each. And if I change from stand to maneuver or attack, it's going to cost me the same amount as it did to get to those. So I might be able to trim points off the French. Now, if the French accept, they don't get to move. We both pass on this entire period. So I can be pretty sure that the French will refuse them. The question is, does it help me to basically take that essentially 2-point loss for these two guys, whom I will have to give stand orders to. If I had been in a town, I could take garrison orders, which would be cool. But I don't think either one is. He is in a fortress, so it's only 1 point for Sforza. I think it's worth doing, which is going to reduce the amount of points the French get. Let's do a quick check on what these points are going to be. Sucks because early on I was stumbling through the system trying to get my feet wet in it, and like all of the Zucker-based designs that I've seen so far, it kind of fell a little flat. Now that I've played a few scenarios of this one, it's become more fun than I was expecting. Most of these don't catch with me. Napoleon at Bay is the one exception. I enjoyed playing that, I remember. Very simple one, easier decisions to make. This one has tough decisions. It has a lot of additional rules that are really tough. It took a lot of getting used to. But after about 2 scenarios of it, I was like, yeah, I'm really beginning to get this. I'm beginning to enjoy it. Then I get sick. And now I'm really gung-ho to play, but can't quite do it. Okay. So we are in the April 3 turn, which means 3 for the French, 2 for the Venetians, 4 for the Imperials. Okay. 3 for the French, but we got to count from here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. 18 hexes, we get 2 shifts against us because of the stupid interphase refusal, which we had to take. We get a 10, we're going to lose 2, so all we get is 1. Likewise, the Venetians are real close, but they get 2 against them. They're going to have a -1, and they had a base of only 2, so they get 1, but they have plenty of points for whatever they want to do. They only have 1 leader. And now for the Imperials, who get to get their full points of 4, I got to count their distance. Their distance is tough. 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks like 30. So we get our base roll. We get a 10, we lose 3. So all we get is 1 point. Well, I can get a garrison here. I'm going to have to pay the 1 for a stand, but I'm not going to be able to do anything without forcing. So it ended up pretty ugly anyway. Now we can check the weather, and it's still in April. And it's going to rain, which really just... it always affects attrition, and it's going to make the rivers tougher to cross. And, well, now I assign my actions, and the French get them first. But we pretty much know what the Imperials have to take. Basically a whole lot of nothing, it looks like. Like I said, we already know what the Imperials had to pick. A stand for Sforza, which uses up his points. But the French have to use up all their points, too. An attack order for von Stein, which only costs 1, if I'm correct, because he's a minor force, but it costs a French point. I would love to take that out of the Venetians. There's no rules saying where the Swiss points come from, but they start off with the French forces. I'm just going to continue charging them French points for this. And then Trivulzio, well, if I do anything other than a standard garrison or retreat, I've got a danger of falling into retreat. No big deal with where I am, but I don't really see taking an active role at this point, not with Sforza around, because if he can get to a maneuver even, he could take this if I move out of there. So I kind of am stuck there. I gave Lautrec a march order. I'm hoping to grab this stuff. But this stuff gives me 2, 4, 5. If I can get this somehow, that makes things more interesting. But right now, I'm at like 6. And if I get these, and the Imperials are at 2, 4, 6. Did I give them that? I did not give them that. That's an 8. So this is pretty much the decision. No, I've got this one too. That's Imperial as well. And there's kind of these out-of-the-way places that I have to get to. And I think what we're going to be seeing is maybe some forced marches by someone like Lautrec trying to grab these and maybe move up to here. But then we get to this interesting point where maybe Deleva can make a rush back down or whatever. And it's all becoming very weird. The one fight that seems to be in our hands is von Stein is interested in trying to bring the Imperials to battle here. And, if we can get another freed up army, that does change the nature of things. If the French army is down here, the Swiss could either move against Sforza if they're still in pretty good strength, or they can make a move over here against Lodi. Right, well, Lautrec made his way down here, deployed his pontoon bridge actually. That just costs a movement point, and it's much cheaper to cross. No rain effect. That's nice. And let's see. The Swiss chose not to go after Del Vaso for the simple reason that he got his entrenchments there. He's in a fortress. It's going to be impossible to siege him. Swiss aren't particularly good in a siege, so he's coming down to try to face Sforza. He's got a lot of advantages in this situation. Among them, the fact that Sforza's got to have a divided force. He has to have some of his troops under his own command and some of them under Frundsberg, because this are units that are assigned to him, so they can't be withdrawn from him. When you do a skirmish, you don't fight the whole enemy force, you fight just one of the commands, which means I might be able to knock him out of there in a couple of quick attacks, and that's going to cause some serious problems. Sforza next turn can throw himself into a retreat and fall back down here to Cremona, but that leaves the Swiss open to march back around here. And it's basically a matter of there will be no field battles, and the sieges are just too hard for really either side without guns to really accomplish. But the Swiss are particularly bad at it. They got lucky with Milan. I'm not counting on getting lucky again. I'm going to try to take victory point areas if I can. I should have grabbed this while I was up there. We'll see. Maybe somebody can get there. Lescaune managed to rally his forces this time, so I might actually pull out of Milan, but the problem with that, of course, is, well, if I do that, then it's open. One of these guys could just kind of do a forced command and march up there. So the game just seems to constantly, at least this scenario, constantly have this weird balance where you're afraid to kind of do anything because that opens up too much for your enemy to rely on. Right now, Deleva over here has a fair-sized force. He might be able to defeat Lautrec. I don't know. It's not like Lautrec has a bigger force particularly. And it's not like I can really assign better units. The only thing I could do with him is I could throw the artillery into a different force from the infantry. But my infantry is poor quality, whereas Deleva has higher quality stuff. So, he's got a good chance of winning that. The big force on the map is the Swiss, and they're not really able, like I said, storming a fortress. We saw what that worked out like last time. I needed a 1 in 6 to get in there. It may be a little better here. If I looked at Vosto, he only has, what, 3, 6. He'd only have 12 strength points, which means 9, 13, 16. Yeah, I'd still be going at 1 to 1, which means I'd be at a -1 on the die roll no matter what. Or, yeah, -1 on the die roll no matter what. And quality-wise, storming, well, I'd be at even because there's 3 strength points at 2 here, and I'd be 3 strength points, or I'd be at 2 because you get disorganized when you storm. I have no artillery, so I can't get a breach. So I can't get the advantage that would be involved in that. Right then, come to some of the other kind of weird things. So the Swiss marched up into here, threw up some breastworks, whatever. Fine. Now, but essentially they marched up to attack the Sforza. Sforza has been on the map all the time. I've actually distinguished here. So these are the leaders who are not on the map since the beginning of the game, who've been, you know, who are unknown. That doesn't have much effect except to conceal them. What it doesn't do is it's not the effect as to whether or not that's the unit, whether or not you're facing a known enemy. So I'm going to keep them face up just because it's easier for me to cope with, knowing what the initiatives are. But theoretically, those guys should be hidden from the opponent and unknown. All right. So with what's going on here, the Swiss marched up to attack the Sforza. But the Swiss have a higher initiative, not just on the counter, but the Sforza actually has a 0 for being in garrison, or stand, which means actually it's the Imperials who have to attack. Or the Swiss can force the Imperials to attack, which is what they want to do, because they have the advantage of the breastworks, which gives them, I think it's 2 extra units, 2 extra strength points that are doubled. So here I have, what, 3, 7, 16. It's going to give me 18 strength points, and I'm forced to be attacked by the Sforza. I'm attacked by a random unit of the Sforza, though. One of the 2 random commands, because I just moved up into place. So I'll be hit by this unit, which only has 5. Now we were at like, what, 16 or something? 9, yeah, 16, 17, 18 to 5. That's not quite 1 to 4, so there's going to be a -1 on the attack. There is the mud. Which comes into play. Well, actually, we're in non-affecting terrain here. There's the mud which comes into play, which adds another. So let's see, the larger force is these guys. So it's a +1 for being larger, +1. Well, -1 for the weather, but I think something gets turned around. Yeah, because it's the smaller force. Okay, or the defender is the larger force. So we have a +2 to the die roll. Wait. Add the modifier to the die roll if the attacker is the larger force. Yeah, that doesn't matter because it's always, no, it's always the attacking force. So it's a -2 to the die roll on the non-affecting terrain. I always get confused by this. And this is not good for Sforza. Now it's his main force that's attacking. He rolls a 3, which means the larger, no, the attacking force, right? Upper results of the attacker. Yeah, the attacking force takes a hit. We'll take it off of our, oh, I was on the wrong chart. We were 2 attacking 3, but there's an additional an additional penalty against the Landsnecks because they're in breastworks. God, is that in attacking in a major battle? No, it doesn't affect. The breastworks don't affect a force in a skirmish. So actually the differential was a 1 to a 3, so it's at -2, and I think we're at a 1D instead. So we took the hit here, and now we have to make, we take an automatic disruption, and we make an additional check. Now 1 unit is demoralized. Yeah, we'll demoralize the weaker unit. And now we make an additional check on the other unit. Or on all units. It's on all units because you could get double demoralized. So let's check that. And we roll a terrible 6, which we were at 1 and 2. The 1 and 2 are both D's, demoralized. If already demoralized during commander activation, it would be eliminated during combat. No effect if already demoralized. So here are his forces, and I believe he's forced to retreat. This allows me to pursue him. Now I did not attack, so I won't get to advance. That's the one disadvantage to all this. And the pursuit table, looks like it's just straight up. No modifier for mud. So we get a 4. 60% of our cav, well, we don't have any. How about 20% of our infantry? Well, we had 16, so 20% sounds like 3 hits on him. And this has to be allocated 1, 2, it has to be hit on the infantry first. 1, 2, 3. So there'll be a loss there. And he's got his retreat, which is going to be his full movement, and he picks up a retreat order instead of the stand order. He gets that for free. Not that it would help him. So now he's got to move his full movement. Now his full movement at this point is 8 minus 1 for the mud is 7. And I should be trying to make it back to a castle of mine. This would be the closest, but I can't really run that way, so we'll see where I can kind of head up this way. Forgot there's this other unit. This took some of the hits as well. It doesn't take any of the demoralization, though, I don't think. But it runs with them. In the next turn, we had a little interplay here where the Swiss came marching across to once again engage Sforza. And then he withdrew and spent a couple of points on the pursuit table, movement points, to get away without as penalty, and managed to get as far as here. Didn't take any more hits. He actually could have stuck around. Swiss moved into place and fortified. They can go for another activation, taking an attrition roll to continue their pursuit. The problem is Frundsberg does have a useful force here. They're very sensitive. That doesn't really matter. Their quality is almost as high as the Swiss. It's better than Sforza, and Sforza can't fight because he's got demoralized troops. So he can't possibly end up in the fight. So it might be, there were 2 options. One would be to entrench here, but with a retreat I don't believe that's allowed. He has to try to get back to where he's going, but I think he is allowed to spend points to evade the pursuit. Anyway, there's the other question of should the Swiss have just marched down and take Cremona, which is the victory point space that they probably want. Again, I don't know. You know, it's really tough. I thought maybe I had trapped him and forced him to fight another attack into my entrenchments. That wasn't the case, though. We have the rest of the turn to go. The only really active thing available is Lautrec. Real effects of the attack. The Swiss managed to continue chasing Sforza. Another pursuit, another successful attack. This time, the attack actually was forced on the Swiss. Didn't make much difference. I had forgotten to take into account, though, they have a bonus attacking in non-affecting hexes. As long as they're not either using earthworks in a major battle or inside a fortress, as long as neither side's, as long as you're not storming a fortress, these Swiss are actually advantaged. And this was not an affecting hex. The Swiss actually did a forced march to get to them. Didn't take an attrition loss. And you can see they've pretty much wiped out Sforza's force. I think it's over in terms of the Imperials being able to do much. All I've got left is Del Vasto here in terms of an operable force. I've got to get... I guess Sforza can fall back to there and try to recuperate. But there is the difficulty of trying to capture the victory point spaces. Meanwhile, Lautrec is, that is his name, isn't it? Is pushing his way forward. He's grabbed Alessandria here. He's on his way to Derthona. And the only problem, though, is there aren't loose forces anywhere. If anybody has a loose force, it's over here. The Leva has Visconti. He could detach some forces into Visconti's hands and use him to go capture more things. There aren't really any things to take, though. A move down this way would be threatening against these guys, and thus would probably end up in a battle that the Imperials can't win. Over here, my two forces, well, they're kind of held in check, although Trivulzia is unable to really be an effective force against him. But if all of Sforza gathers together, all of the Imperials there, he might have a chance of stopping the Swiss, but there's no value up here. The only value is down here and then over here. Now this would not be a bad place for Visconti to go marching to, and if he does so, it kind of freezes all the territories in somebody's hands, with the exception of this space up here. So what are we looking for, Imperial? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 points in the Imperial's hands versus 2, 3, 4, say this falls, 5, 6, 7 points in the French hands. So it doesn't look like the French can win the scenario if they let things stay stalemate. So they're kind of going to have to make a move, at least to take up another one of these cities, not just Cremona, but at least something else. But it's pretty close right now. As we push into May and another activation turn, we just finished off April. Very little happened. It was mud. Sforza was only able to get a hex. Von Stein was able to move a little bit down with the capture of this hex. I may have walked through this and taken it, which is illegal. I would have had to stop, but I think I had enough movement points to get across. Anyway, not much activation here. Von Stein is just trying to make his way to get the victory point hexes under French control, whatever that ends up meaning. The real issue right now would be to lock up the Leva, and how to go about that. Probably trying to come from the south here. They don't have a lot of troops to base him. Not as much as he has, actually, I think. I don't know, it's pretty close. And there really isn't a lot for the French to be able to turn to their advantage. And that's kind of the trouble here. If I could get a French commander moving over to join the Swiss, he could actually... No, he can't take... Unless it's Lautrec himself, he can't take command of the Swiss. So that's problematic. Anyway, all the little markers are gone. The Swiss managed to drop themselves into a maneuver. That cost an activation point because it's a minor force. If it was a major force, it would not have cost him anything, but with a minor force, it always costs to convert into an attack or maneuver form. But that means that von Stein has the ability to go to an attack order next time. Was that worth it? Was it not? It depends on what we end up getting for points for the French. We're going to probably drop this down here because I think A is not aligned, so I can get an easier line of command there. And that's about it. Right then, I think the big question is, do I try for the interphase turn again? This is the last turn of the game. Obviously, again, the French aren't going to accept it, but it's going to reduce their points, which seems like a valid plan. Yes, it may cost me more to activate Imperial forces, but I'm not quite sure how much the Imperials can really do here. I think the only thing I could do is spawn out Visconti to go try to cover a space. Other than that, we're pretty much tied up in terms of what actions we can do. And it's fair weather. I think I want to get an activation here that I didn't count on. So the French only had 1 point because of the penalties, and we took that over on von Stein to keep him in maneuver. He's not going to need that attack bonus that he fiddled around to get anyway. And only 1 point for the Imperials, and indeed I'm going to activate Visconti. But you know what? I'm going to take a shot at activating Del Vasto here to try to get him a move. Now he's got normal units. So we shall roll on that. Now, what can he get for this? This is a forced order. That gets a +1, which sucks. I don't have extra money to do anything, obviously. Let's see what we get. We get a 2, he passes. Not really counting on him attacking, so I'm going to give him the maneuver order here as well. And we keep Sforza in retreat because that'll allow him to move for free to get back here, which is what we want to do so he can recover. But basically we're surrendering this. The question is, what's moving where? Visconti can go cover a space, and Del Vasto, this is an unimportant location, can go make sure that the French don't get too uppity. Remember though, Milan doesn't matter. Might be worth making a shot at Lascaux as well, but I didn't think of it in time. But he's got kind of the fastest drop down or up towards getting one of these points covered. Yeah, let me take a shot with him as well. Just he's sensitive, which sucks. And it's a +1 to the die roll here. He's not a particularly good leader. He gets a 3. That's an F. This is going to be a normal discipline check. Am I 2 or more? Yeah, so I lose a point, and I don't get to make the change, but I can check again next turn. That should have been done before the Imperials made their checks or declared what they were doing, but that's okay. I could try to do something with the Venetians, but I don't have a garrison for the Venetian victory point city there. And this is not as valuable as this, but I also don't want to have a completely demoralized force, because had I done this, then this could have been a check for an attack order, and it could almost certainly take this city if it's completely demoralized. The Venetians are, well, first of all, they have the possibility of throwing themselves into retreat if they try to do anything. They're reasonable forces, normal value forces, so they're unlikely to just completely dissolve, but they could try to retreat off the map if I think maybe they could stay in that location. Let me look at what their orders are. They must be issued a retreat. They will retreat till Bergamo, Brescia, or Crema. That is not any of these. So I would have to retreat to get to a different place. That could be Crema over here, but that doesn't really help me. So there's no place I could go that's, if I do get into the retreat, that's more valuable than where I'm going. So this is what I'm going to stick with, and we'll see what happens. I don't think we're going to see another fight in the game. It's just going to be racing to try to get the victory point spaces now. I'm getting quite comfortable with sort of the mechanisms of trying to game the situation in terms of the initiatives, etc. So, I'm like, well, it's time for me to pass now, because that means you won't get double moves with anything. This happened to the French, so that de Leyva couldn't get all the way to here and get himself a capture. Actually, it's not a capture, but get himself into position. This probably isn't going to fall. It looks like he's going to reach there first, but it meant these guys didn't get a second move, which they could have taken. The Swiss and Sforza barely moved, if at all. I think Sforza didn't have enough movement points to cross the river. And von Stein barely is getting there, but he'll be able to make it in time. In just a couple of moves, being an admin march, well, I was already heading this way. There isn't really a road network that would work for me, so I had to go take this city, or this fortress, in order to continue on up to here. I'll probably make it there and be established there, and it's not like the French have anything that they can launch. Lescun keeps failing on his checks. He's not destroyed yet, but I'd like to get him moving, but I can't. The Swiss have made it here into Cremona and are not going to be able to reach any further. And I think we're really at the point where we know where this game is going to end. This is the victory point setup we're going to have. So, let's call it here. I mean, seriously, I don't really see much point to playing out the last couple turns just to move some Imperial forces into their garrisons when the French don't have enough force to make an attack out of it. So point-wise, what are we at? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for the French. And I believe the Imperials have that beat with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No? Yeah, I guess 7, 8, 9. So it's going to be a slight Imperial victory, enough to set the stage for the next scenario. I'm going to take a little break from this, but this has been an interesting scenario. I got something else I want to play, and it's a weekend, so that's cool. This has been a really interesting scenario out of all of them. I'm feeling more and more comfort with the system, and beginning to really see how much it's kind of not really try to get the enemy into a battle in general, although some of the scenarios were more like that, where there was the major battle up here in that truncated scenario, or whatever, where there's one key goal. This one had things spread out all over the place, and it really kind of left the different forces in stasis. It was neat seeing the French have to get down to here to get some additional administrative points and some additional troops, but in the end, the only thing that really mattered was making sure that I had the hook up to here, so I kept getting some administrative points. Kind of sucked losing a turn's worth of them that I could have possibly gotten. Milan itself, how important was it? It didn't turn out to be that important because I wasn't able to stage anything through there. Yeah. Anyway, interesting situation. I'm learning enough about the game that I feel like I'm getting a pretty good grasp on where it's flawed, and I see a couple of major flaws. They're not the things that I griped about necessarily at the beginning, but there are the one that I can fix easily, and then the one that I can't. The one that I can is the the attack roll, and I may switch to my little modification for that for the next scenario. The one that I can't really figure out how to fix is, look, if I'm a Capitano General and I bump up against a smaller force, yes, I can reorganize my force and make sure that I'm kind of evenly balanced as far as my commanders can go, but I can never use my overwhelming force. There's no chance of that happening. It's always going to be a skirmish fight against smaller forces, unless I'm facing the other Capitano General. And something about that feels a little false. The fact that when two Capitano Generals meet, it's going to be a major battle, and if one meets a minor force, it's not going to be a major battle, and the Capitano General kind of gets a random unit, or maybe a selected unit, depending on what whether it's a set-piece battle, to attack. And there's something that feels a little false about that. I know you could argue that either way, but to me it is still disturbing. The other rule, though, the other rule that I really question is not something that's unfixable. This one is, because I would have to come up with some kind of means of, hey, sometimes a skirmish will not be a real skirmish. Sometimes I'd be able to bring all my force into play. And then there would also be the possibility of two Capitano Generals meeting, and maybe it doesn't devolve into a major battle. That's harder to understand. It really is. To me, it makes a lot more sense that even if you kind of say, well, these forces are a little spread out, there would be some ability to bring reinforcements in, have another round of combat or whatever, and that just doesn't happen with the skirmishes. One side wins, one side loses.